the stranger behind the barrier. The sun was just beginning to break through the morning mist that blanketed downtown New York. It was still early, but the streets were already lined with people. Curious onlookers, fans with their phones out, and passers-by who had no idea that one of Hollywood's biggest stars was filming right there. Behind yellow barriers and a wall of security, cameras were set, lights rigged, and crew members moved quickly, preparing for a high-intensity scene from the next John Wick film. Keanu Reeves stood quietly by the edge of the set. He wore his character's familiar black suit, stillness in his posture but storm in his eyes, ready to become John Wick again for the next take. But even in full costume, there was something soft in his expression, something always watching, always aware of more than just the film. As the director shouted out instructions and the crew repositioned equipment, Keanu's gaze drifted. He wasn't looking at the cameras or his stunt double or the lights. He was looking just past the barrier, toward a man who seemed out of place in the crowd. The man stood in the shadows of a building, partially hidden behind a rusted metal post. He wore a tattered coat, his beard unkempt, and one of his shoes was missing its sole. In a city where most people rushed past without noticing, Keanu noticed. And not just once. For 3 days now, this same man had been there, never asking for anything, never speaking, just standing. There was something in the man's eyes, lost but alert, distant but somehow searching. And it stirred something in Keanu that he couldn't shake. Between takes, while makeup artists adjusted his hair and assistants handed him water, he kept glancing back. Most others on set had already dismissed the man as another homeless soul blending into the background of the city. But not Keanu. Something about this man didn't feel like a coincidence. On the fourth morning, things changed. The director yelled "cut" after a tense action sequence, and the crew broke into casual chatter. Keanu walked off set slowly, ignoring the call of his assistant. His eyes scanned the barrier. The man was still there, leaning against the post. But this time, his hand was clutching his chest, and his knees gave out as he collapsed to the sidewalk. No one else saw it happen. Everyone was too busy checking gear, fixing lights, and resetting props. But Keanu moved. He didn't pause to ask permission or explain. He climbed over the barrier in a single motion, startling security, and sprinted to the man's side. The man was struggling to breathe. His lips were turning pale and his eyes fluttered with fear. "Sir, can you hear me?" Keanu asked, kneeling down, his hand already reaching for his phone. The man nodded weakly. Then, between labored breaths, he whispered something so faint, Keanu almost didn't catch it. "Don't let them see." Keanu didn't understand. "See what?" The paramedics arrived quickly, thanks to Keanu's fast call. By the time they loaded the man into the ambulance, a small crowd had formed, including some of the film crew. Phones were out, but Keanu raised a hand, asking them silently not to film. Surprisingly, they listened, but the man's words echoed in Keanu's mind. Don't let them see. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was something deeper, something secret. And Keanu, for reasons he didn't fully understand, felt responsible. After the ambulance pulled away, the director tried to get him back into costume, but Keanu shook his head. "I need to follow him," he said simply. "Keanu, we're behind schedule. I'm sorry, but this is more important." They didn't argue further. They knew when Keanu spoke like that. There was no convincing him otherwise. Keanu called a driver, hopped into the black SUV, and followed the ambulance to the nearest hospital. Inside, after waiting for over an hour, he was finally allowed into the small emergency room where the man lay on a cot, breathing through an oxygen mask. The nurse warned him. "He hasn't said much. We found something odd, though. No ID. No records. It's like this man doesn't exist." Keanu pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed. The man slowly turned his head. "Why did you help me?" he asked, voice raspy. "Because you needed help," Keanu replied gently. The man looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a folded, yellowing photograph. He handed it to Keanu with shaking fingers. "You're the only one I can trust," he said. Keanu unfolded the picture slowly. It showed a young boy and girl sitting on a bench near a large fountain. Between them was a man, a younger version of the stranger lying in this hospital bed. Behind them, barely visible in the background, was something Keanu never expected to see. Himself, not as John Wick, not as a celebrity, but as his real self. Younger, casual, walking behind them on what looked like a quiet day more than a decade ago. Keanu stared at the image in disbelief. How? When was this taken? The man closed his eyes and whispered, "You saved my daughter once. Now, you have to find her." Keanu leaned in, heart pounding. "Who is she?" But the man was already slipping back into unconsciousness, the monitor beeping slowly beside him. Keanu sat frozen, gripping the photo in his hands. He didn't know what was happening yet, but something inside him shifted. Something told him that this was no random moment. And somehow this stranger, this photo, and this missing girl were all tied to something he wasn't ready for, but couldn't ignore. The nurse came in. "Sir, he'll need rest. We'll keep him for observation. Are you family?" Keanu looked at the photo again and replied quietly, "I might be." As he stepped out into the hallway, the city noise outside sounded different now, more distant, less real. And in his hand, the old photograph trembled slightly as if carrying weight far beyond its paper. He didn't know her name yet, but he was going to find her, and nothing would stop him. The girl in the photograph, the morning after the hospital visit, felt different. The sun still shone over the city, the streets still buzzed with impatient horns and rushing footsteps, but something inside Keanu had shifted. He sat alone in his modest hotel room, the photo the stranger had given him resting on the table in front of him. He had studied it for hours, hoping to find something, anything that could lead him closer to the girl the man had spoken of. Her face was youthful, maybe 10 years old in the photo, her eyes wide with innocence, her arm wrapped tightly around the boy beside her. But it wasn't her smile or the soft way she leaned on her brother that pulled Keanu in. It was the sadness in her eyes, a sadness he'd seen before, not in children but in adults who had seen too much and spoken too little. He had no name, no date, no location beyond the vague outline of a fountain in the background. And yet, he couldn't shake the certainty that he had walked by that fountain. He didn't just believe it, he knew it. It was Central Park, tucked near the east side by a quiet cluster of trees few tourists wandered into. He had walked past it more than once during moments he needed solitude, long before John Wick made him a global name. And now, that fountain had become his only starting point. Keanu slipped on a hoodie, pulled a baseball cap low over his head, and made his way out. The production team had already sent messages, worried he'd be missing another shoot day. But this wasn't just a break from filming. This was something deeper, something urgent. He walked quickly, avoiding eye contact with the occasional fan who might recognize him. And within an hour, he stood before the fountain. It was cracked at the base now, its stone edges worn by time and weather. But it was the same, the curve of the benches, the iron fence behind it. All of it matched the photo. He stood there in silence, feeling the weight of the image in his pocket. Memories stirred, of laughter from strangers, street performers playing soft tunes, children chasing, pigeons. Had that day been one of them? Had he walked past that family without knowing what his presence would one day mean to them? A gentle voice broke his thoughts. "You looking for something, sir?" Keanu turned to see an older woman sitting on one of the benches, feeding crumbs to a few nearby birds. Her coat was patched, her scarf wrapped tightly around her neck despite the mild weather. But her eyes were sharp, observant. Keanu hesitated. "Actually, yes, I'm looking for someone. I have a photo." He handed her the picture without a word. The woman squinted, adjusting her glasses, and looked long and hard at it. "This is old," she murmured. "Looks like over 10 years ago." "You recognize them?" Keanu asked, his heart beating faster. She nodded slowly. I do. The girl, that's Layla. Her brother's name was Joshua, I think, sweet kids. They used to come here often with their father. Always quiet, always sat right there on that bench. Keanu leaned in. Do you know where they are now? Where Layla is. The woman's expression darkened. She looked around cautiously before leaning closer. The father... Something happened. About 8 years ago he vanished. Just stopped showing up. Word was he got into some kind of trouble. The kind no one wants to talk about. And the kids... Well, the girl was taken. Social services, maybe. Or worse. People said different things. But no one saw her again. Keanu's stomach tightened. You don't know what happened to her? The woman sighed. I wish I did. Sweet girl like that. She didn't deserve whatever came next. He thanked her and walked away, his mind spinning. The stranger in the hospital had spoken of danger, of trust, of needing help. And now he knew it wasn't just about poverty or bad luck. Something darker had been chasing them. As the sun dropped lower in the sky, Keanu made his way to the hospital again. This time, he brought with him questions. The kind no one on the set or in his usual life ever asked him. But when he arrived, at the emergency room desk and asked to see the man, the nurse's face turned pale. I'm sorry, she said quietly. He's not here anymore. Keanu's heart sank. What do you mean? He was under observation. She shook her head. He left, without checking out, sometime after midnight. We don't know how. He pulled out the IV, left the oxygen. It's like he just disappeared. Keanu stared at her, struggling to believe it. Did he leave anything? Any note? The nurse reached under the desk and pulled out a torn envelope. This was under his pillow. It's addressed to you. Keanu took the envelope and stepped outside. The street noise surrounded him, but in his hands, the letter made everything go still. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper with shaking handwriting. Keanu, if you're reading this, it means they found me again, and I had to run. I never wanted you involved, but I have no one else. Layla is alive. They hit her. She's not safe. There's something about her they don't want the world to know. Go to the East River docks. Find the man with the scar above his left eye. He has answers. But be careful, they're watching you now too. Keanu folded the letter slowly, each word branding itself into his mind. Not only was Layla alive, but others were involved. People dangerous enough to make a dying man run. And now Keanu was in the center of it. That night, he returned to his room, every light off except for the lamp above his desk. He pinned the photo to the wall, placed the letter beside it, and began to map out what he knew. The stranger had been watching him during filming. He had waited days just to collapse in front of him. And now he had vanished without a trace. Layla had been taken years ago, possibly hidden by people who feared what she knew, or what she was. And now, Keanu was being watched. He glanced toward the window where a faint red light flickered across the street. It could have been nothing. A passing car. A reflection. But deep down, he knew better. The letter wasn't just a warning. It was a transfer of responsibility. Somehow, in helping a stranger, Keanu had uncovered a story no one wanted told. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the words, "Go to the East River docks." And that's when it happened. A soft knock on his hotel room door. 3 gentle taps. No voice. No footsteps retreating. Keanu stood slowly, each breath measured. He stepped to the door and looked through the peephole. No one. But just as he turned to walk away, he noticed something on the floor. An envelope, identical to the one from the hospital. No return address, no name. He picked it up, heart racing. Inside was a photo. It was recent, and it showed him, Keanu, standing beside the fountain that very morning, taken from a distance, watched, targeted. He wasn't just part of the story now. He was inside it. The secret beneath the docks, the cold wind rolled off the East River, carrying with it the thick smell of rusted metal, salt water, and distant smoke from ships too old to still be working. It was just past midnight when Keanu Reeves arrived at the docks. The city, usually filled with movement and life, felt strangely quiet here. This part of Manhattan was forgotten, tucked between old warehouses and chain-link fences, where broken crates and forgotten memories piled up like driftwood. The moonlight cast silver shadows across the wet pavement, and Keanu moved slowly, each step echoing louder than he expected. In his coat pocket, the stranger's letter was folded tightly. He had read it so many times by now that he knew every word by heart. Find the man with the scar above his left eye. The message seemed simple, but nothing about this was simple anymore. Not the girl in the photo, not the vanishing father, and not the envelope that had appeared at his door, containing a photo of himself, proof that someone was watching his every move. Keanu walked along the edge of the dock, eyes scanning the shadows between containers and cranes. He passed a group of dock workers unloading pallets under a floodlight. They barely glanced at him. Maybe they didn't recognize him under the hoodie, or maybe they were used to people passing through at odd hours. Still, he kept his head down. Whoever left that photo at his door knew where he had been. And if they were watching him, they could be anywhere, even here. A small fire burned in a barrel near one of the storage sheds. Beside it stood a man in a long coat, lighting a cigarette with a trembling hand. He looked up when Keanu approached, revealing a rugged face, half covered by a thick beard, but there it was, just above the left eye, a long, curved scar like a crescent moon carved into his skin. "You lost?" the man asked, his voice low and weathered. "I was told to find you," Keanu said, carefully, not revealing too much. "By who?" "A man. Layla's father." The man's cigarette froze halfway to his lips. He stared at Keanu with a sharpness that cut through the night air. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "And if you're asking about Layla, then it's already too late." "Too late for what?" Keanu stepped closer. "I don't even know who she is. I just know her father begged me to find her. He said she was in danger." The man exhaled smoke and shook his head. "Danger isn't the right word. They don't want her found because of what she carries." Keanu frowned. "What do you mean?" "Come, with me," the man said, motioning toward the shed. Inside, the room was cramped and filled with dusty equipment, old tools, fishing nets, crates with faded shipping labels. The man locked the door behind them, then pulled a folder from under, a floorboard. He tossed it onto the table between them. It slid open, revealing several documents, photographs, and a newspaper clipping from over a decade ago. Keanu picked it up. The headline read, "Orphan Girl Vanishes from State Custody. Suspicions of Illegal Testing Arise." Beneath the article was a photo. Layla, slightly older than in the fountain picture, her face pale, eyes full of fear. "She disappeared from the system," the man said. "But not by accident. She was taken by people who needed her hidden." "Why?" Keanu asked, his voice tight. The man hesitated. "Because she's not just any child. She's part of a program. They called it Project Tenfold." Keanu's brow furrowed. "What kind of program?" The man pulled a crumpled sheet from the folder. It was a medical report. Strange symbols ran along the edges, and in the center, Layla's name appeared, along with rows of data and something marked Genetic Variance Classification, Level 7. "They experimented on her," the man said. "Before, she even turned 9. Something about her DNA. They believed she could survive diseases others couldn't, adapt faster, heal quicker. They thought she might be the answer to something bigger. But when things went wrong, when one of the doctors turned whistleblower, they erased everything. Layla included." Keanu's throat tightened. "And her father?" "He found out too much," the man replied. "They let him run just long enough to disappear, and he's been hiding ever since, until he made the mistake of stepping into the light again." "Why come to me?" Keanu asked. "Why not go to the police?" The man laughed bitterly. "You Think the police weren't part of the cover-up? No one with a badge would protect that girl, but you. He must have seen something in you. Maybe because of what you did years ago. Keanu blinked. What I did? The man pointed at the folder. Again. There, clipped to the back of one document, was another photo. It was Keanu, more than 10 years ago, helping a child outside a hospital. The girl had scraped knees and a bloody hand, and Keanu was crouching beside her, wrapping her palm in a napkin. A random act of kindness forgotten by the world, but not by the man who had taken the picture. He said that moment gave him hope. The man said that if one stranger could care like that, maybe others could too. Keanu sat, back in the chair, his mind reeling. Layla wasn't just missing. She had been hidden by people who feared what she represented. A girl altered by science, stolen from her life and buried in secrecy. He looked at the man. Do you know where she is now? The man's jaw tightened. I know someone who might. But getting to her won't be easy. They've moved her 3 times in the last 6 months. Last I heard, she was being held in a private clinic, off the books, high security. But they won't keep her there long. Why? Because they're running out of time, the man replied. And once she's no longer useful. The sentence didn't need finishing. Keanu stood up. Then we don't wait. But just as he reached for the folder to take it with him, the building shook with a deafening crash. The window shattered. The front door splintered inward. A flashbang exploded at their feet. Everything went white. Keanu dropped to the floor, covering his ears, his instincts from years of stunt work kicking in. But this wasn't a film set. This was real. Shadows moved. Through the smoke. Figures in black gear, faces covered, weapons raised. The man with the scar shoved the folder into Keanu's hands, pushing him toward a hatch in the floor. Go now! What about you? Keanu shouted. They already know me. You're the only one who can finish this. Keanu hesitated, but another blast rocked the building. He dropped through the hatch, landing hard in a narrow tunnel that reeked of mold and seaweed. Behind him, gunfire erupted. He didn't look back. He ran through the tunnel, folder clutched to his chest, heart pounding louder than the footsteps chasing him. He didn't know who they were. He didn't know how they found him so fast. But now he understood something he hadn't before. This wasn't just about Layla. This was about stopping the truth. And he was now the only person left who could bring it to light. As he reached the end of the tunnel and kicked open a rusted grate, a sharp sting shot across his shoulder. Something had grazed him. He stumbled out into the dark alley behind a seafood warehouse, blood seeping through his shirt. He clutched the folder tighter, teeth clenched, pain sharp. A black car sped past the entrance to the alley, then another. They were looking for him. He had only moments, but he also had something they didn't know. He had a face the world trusted, a name they couldn't silence easily. And now, he had a mission that went far beyond finishing a movie. He wasn't playing John Wick anymore. This time, he was in the real fight. And somewhere out there, a scared young woman was waiting for someone to finally keep the promise her father had made to her years ago. Keanu Reeves would not let her down. The clinic with no name, the pain in his shoulder pulsed with every step. But Keanu Reeves didn't slow down. Blood trickled beneath his jacket, darkening the fabric near his collarbone. The narrow alley behind the seafood warehouse led him to a rusted staircase which he climbed, forcing himself to breathe through the agony. He found an old fire exit at the top, kicked it open with what strength he had left, and collapsed into the darkness of an abandoned storage room. The silence swallowed him as the door slammed shut behind him. Outside, the black cars passed again, tires hissing on wet concrete. The men hunting him were professional, methodical, and they wouldn't stop. Not until they recovered the folder or silenced the only witness left. Inside the room, Keanu pressed his back against the wall and opened the folder under the flickering bulb overhead. His vision swam slightly, his body cold from blood loss, but he pushed through. The documents inside were arranged in layers: surveillance photos, copies of lab notes, a partial floor plan with a hand-drawn circle in red ink, and one last photo that sent a cold shiver through him. It was Layla again, but older now. Maybe 17. She was seated in a sterile white room, hands in her lap, eyes closed as if asleep. A digital tag in the lower corner read, Subject 7, Omega status, relocation pending. Someone had taken this photo recently, and the date stamped in the corner was from just 4 days ago. Keanu's pulse quickened. She was still alive, and she was being moved. He flipped to the floor plan. It was labeled only with the words, Nexus, medical. No address, no logo. But then he remembered something. The scarred man's voice, low and urgent in that shed before it exploded, a private clinic, off the books, high security. That wasn't just a description. It was a warning. It meant the place wasn't legal, wasn't regulated, and more importantly, it didn't want to be found. But Keanu had an advantage. He had been there before, not as himself, but as John Wick. 3 years ago, one of the movie's fight sequences had been filmed in a decommissioned facility just outside New Jersey. The production team had mentioned the building had once been a temporary holding site for medical research before it was bought and shut down by private investors. It had clean lines, narrow corridors, reinforced doors, and a rooftop helipad. Everything about it had felt too real, because it had been. Keanu now believed the clinic had never shut down. It had simply changed its name, buried its records, and carried on its work in the dark. He needed help, and he needed to act fast. He used a burner phone gifted by the man with the scar. It had no internet, no GPS, and no traceable apps. He dialed, one of the few people in the world he could trust, an old friend from his stunt team, a man named Devin who owed him more than a few favors. When Devin answered, his voice was tired but alert. Keanu, I need extraction gear, medical supplies, and access to blueprints from the old asylum set. Now. You're not filming again already, are you? This isn't a movie, Keanu said flatly. This is real, and there's a girl whose life depends on it. 20 minutes later, Devin arrived in a beat-up van, carrying a black duffel filled with first aid supplies, tactical clothing, 2 burner radios, and a hard drive with archived building scans from their previous shoot. Keanu didn't waste time. While Devin cleaned the wound and stitched the gash in his shoulder, Keanu studied the blueprints and cross-referenced them with the red markings in the folder. This clinic, it's built like a fortress, Keanu murmured, eyes focused. Only one ground-level entrance, keycard protected. Windows are bulletproof. Internal power grid. Security feed loops every 4 minutes. Rooftop access is limited. But there's a supply vent near the southern wing. You planning to sneak in there alone? Devin asked, wrapping the final bandage. I won't have a second chance. By tomorrow, they'll move her again. Maybe out of the country. Devin exhaled slowly. Man, you were always the guy who did his own stunts. But this... Keanu looked up, his eyes calm but burning with purpose. This isn't about stunts. This is about not letting the world forget a girl who's been hiding in silence for most of her life. The plan came together fast. That night, just before 2 a.m., Keanu crouched near the service perimeter of the clinic, dressed in black gear, strapped tightly to his back. The area was quiet. No lights on the building, no guards outside. That in itself was suspicious. Places like this didn't sleep. He crept through the grass to the vent, unscrewed the rusted panel, and pulled himself inside. The narrow shaft led him above the medical wing, and every movement echoed like thunder. He moved slow, controlled, breath measured. Below him, muffled voices and footsteps reminded him that this place was alive, no matter how silent it appeared on the surface. Eventually, he reached a maintenance panel and dropped silently into a hallway lined with white tiles and humming lights. The air was sterile, heavy with the scent of antiseptic. He pressed himself against the wall, checking for cameras. Just as the folder had shown, the feed loop gave him 4 minutes before the next sweep. He followed the red markings in his mind, every turn of the hallway, etched into memory. He passed empty rooms, some filled with equipment too advanced for any public hospital, others simply cold and dark. Then he saw it, the symbol from the photo. Subject 7. He opened the door slowly. And there she was, not strapped down, not hooked to machines, just sitting quietly on the edge of the bed, her eyes staring at the wall. She looked even older than the photo suggested, maybe 18 now. Her hair was cut short and a faint bruise darkened her cheekbone. But when she turned and saw him, her expression didn't change. She whispered, "You're real." Keanu nodded, stepping inside. "Your father sent me." For the first time, her expression broke, not into relief, but into fear. "No," she said. "Then they'll come for you too." "They already have," Keanu replied, kneeling beside her. "But we don't have time. I'm getting you out." "You don't understand," she said. "They didn't just test me. They put something in me. Something they can't control. They're scared of me. Not because I'm dangerous to others, but because I'm proof of what they did." He helped her stand. "Then let's make sure the world sees it." They made it to the hallway before the alarm sounded. Someone had triggered it. Either a camera had caught him or a silent sensor he missed had tripped. Lights flashed. The facility roared to life. "We run," Keanu said, grabbing her hand. They bolted down the corridor, every door slamming shut behind them, lockdown protocols echoing through the halls. Layla didn't hesitate. She matched his pace, eyes sharp, breath steady. She wasn't a helpless girl, she was focused, alert, and unafraid. "Elevator or stairs?" she asked between breaths. "Stairs. Elevators can be shut down." They reached the emergency stairwell and climbed fast. 2 floors up, the rooftop door required a keycard. Keanu braced for the worst. But Layla stepped forward and swiped a badge from her pocket. "You had access?" he asked. "I wasn't a prisoner," she said. "Not always." The door clicked open. The rooftop was dark, wind howling over the edge. A single helipad blinked red in the distance. Below them, black vans were pulling in. Shadows moved fast. Guards, with rifles, voices shouting. Then came a voice from the stairwell behind them. "Don't move." Keanu turned, shielding Layla behind him. 3 armed men blocked the exit, their weapons raised. But before they could fire, Layla stepped forward, raising her hand. A low hum filled the air. The guns shook, then dropped from the guards' hands, as if yanked by invisible force. The men staggered backward, eyes wide with fear. Keanu stared in disbelief. "How did you—" Layla looked at him, her eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. "I told you," she said. "They put something in me." The fire that couldn't be hidden. Keanu Reeves stood frozen under the moonlight, his breath sharp against the cold night air as he stared at Layla. The rooftop silence had returned, but it felt heavy, stretched, unnatural, like the air itself was holding its breath. At their feet lay the rifles tossed violently from the hands of the guards who had threatened them. Those men were now unconscious near the rooftop stairs, their limbs twisted in positions that no human struggle could have caused. And yet Layla stood calm, her shoulders squared, her hands still slightly trembling. The glow in her eyes had faded, but something in her presence remained, charged, as if the storm inside her hadn't fully passed. Keanu stepped toward her, unsure whether to speak, unsure if she needed comfort or space. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice low, steady despite the adrenaline still burning in his veins. "Since I was 9, she replied without looking at him. "The first time it happened, I thought I was dying. My heart raced, my head spun, and then suddenly, the room started shaking. I thought I was the one breaking. Turns out it was everything else." She finally turned to him, her eyes filled not with fear but with something deeper. Regret, maybe. Sorrow. Maybe both. "They wanted to weaponize it, isolate it, study it until I became data instead of a girl. But I fought back. Not with fists. With silence, with stillness. They thought they'd broken me, but they never realized I was learning." Keanu nodded. "And you've been hiding it ever since?" "Yes. And now they know I'm not hiding anymore." Sirens echoed below the rooftop. Floodlights swept the edges of the building as more black vans pulled in, their engines humming with menace. A helicopter's rotors began to stir in the distance. The clinic had lost control, And now the cleanup team was coming. "We need to move," Keanu said. "They'll send more. And not just to catch you. They'll make sure no one ever hears about what you can do." Layla stepped beside him as he raised his radio. "Devin, status?" His friend's voice crackled through. "I'm 5 blocks out, rooftop access point clear. Extraction window is 60 seconds max. You've got company coming in heavy." Keanu grabbed Layla's hand. "Then we make those. 60 seconds count." They rushed across the rooftop, dodging between power boxes and antenna towers. The extraction point was on a connecting roof just past a small maintenance gap. The building was close enough to leap, barely. But the wind had picked up, and the rooftop trembled with vibrations from the approaching chopper. "Can you jump?" Keanu asked her. "Can you?" He smiled faintly. "Guess we'll find out." Without another word, Keanu sprinted to the edge and jumped. The air swallowed him for a heartbeat, and then his boot slammed into the gravel of the opposite rooftop, knees buckling from the force. He turned just as Layla leapt, her body lean, her arms outstretched, and for a moment it looked like she might fall short. But the air around her shifted subtly and she landed beside him with eerie precision, barely stumbling. Keanu didn't have time to ask questions. They raced to the far end where Devin stood beside a black cargo chopper, rotor blades whipping their hair and coats into chaos. Devin reached for Layla, helping her in. "This her?" "Yes," Keanu shouted. "Go now!" The chopper lifted, just as a security team burst onto the far rooftop. Muzzle flashes flared, bullets whistled, but the chopper rose fast, tilting away from the edge before disappearing into the night sky. Inside, Layla sat opposite Keanu, her arms wrapped around herself. Her face was pale, not from fear but from restraint, as if she were holding back something even now. Devin handed Keanu a comms headset and gave him a look that said he'd ask questions later. For now, they flew west, toward the outskirts of the city, away from surveillance, away from the roads that could be tracked. They landed in a private hangar miles from any residential area. A safe house had been arranged, an off-grid cabin deep in the Catskill Mountains. Keanu didn't ask how Devin had pulled it off. Right now, all that mattered was time. The cabin was simple: wooden walls, a fireplace, a pair of rooms with beds, and a stocked kitchen. No Wi-Fi, no phone line, no cameras. It was the kind of place people went to disappear. And Layla, for once, didn't question it. By the firelight, Keanu finally spoke. "What exactly did they do to you?" Layla stared into the flames. "They called it Phase 7. It was supposed to be a medical breakthrough. They weren't trying to make me powerful. They were trying to make me immune. But something happened during the injections. A genetic trigger, something no one could explain. My cells started reacting. Not just healing. Transforming. Amplifying." She looked at him now, eyes reflecting the flickering orange light. "Pain makes it worse. When I'm afraid or angry, it leaks out. I didn't even know how to stop it until I was 12. Keanu leaned forward. "Why did your father wait so long to find help?" "Because he thought the world would destroy me before it ever understood me." And he wasn't wrong. Keanu nodded slowly, letting her words settle. He understood now why the stranger in the hospital had spoken with such desperation, why he had disappeared, and why he had trusted a stranger like Keanu to do what no one else could: protect his daughter from a world that would rather silence her than see her truth. But there was something more, something nagging at him. Those men at the clinic, they weren't just guarding you, they were protecting information. And that means someone higher is pulling the strings. You mean someone funding it? Worse, Keanu said. Someone who's already using it. He pulled out the folder again, flipping to a document he hadn't looked closely at before. A list of trial subjects, 10 names, 9 marked with black lines. Deceased, 1 remained. Subject 7, Layla. But at the top of the page, above the name list, was a project title: Phoenix Initiative, Tier 1 deployment pending. Keanu looked at her. This isn't over. They weren't just experimenting. They were creating something, and if Phoenix is real, it means you weren't the goal. You were just the beginning. Layla stared at the fire again. Then we have to stop it. We can't do it alone, Keanu said. But we don't need to. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small USB drive, something he had quietly taken from the clinic before their escape. It was marked with the same Phoenix logo, barely the size of a fingernail. We leak this to the right hands, he said. We don't just protect you. We expose them. And what happens to me, Layla asked quietly. What happens when the world sees what I am? Keanu didn't answer at first. He leaned back, staring into the fire. Then, softly, he said, I think they'll see the girl who never gave up. And that's more powerful than anything they put inside you. The fire crackled between them. But outside, deep in the forest beyond the cabin, headlights flickered in the distance. The Phoenix had risen, and they weren't done yet. When the fire meets the world, the morning mist lingered thick over the treetops and the cabin sat nestled in a hollow of silence, surrounded by endless trees and a stillness too perfect to be trusted. Inside, Keanu Reeves stood at the edge of the living room window, scanning the woods through a pair of old binoculars Devon had left behind. The fire had long died down, and though the warmth remained, something inside him had shifted. The quiet felt unnatural now. Not comforting, not peaceful, like a breath held for too long, waiting to break. He'd lived through sets exploding, stunt cars flipping midair, bullets ricocheting in rehearsed chaos. But nothing had made his instincts burn like this silence did now. Layla slept on the small couch behind him, wrapped in a wool blanket. Her face relaxed for the first time since they'd escaped the clinic. The faint hum from the USB drive Keanu had recovered still pulsed in the room. It was connected to an offline laptop, decrypting slowly. On that tiny chip lay proof of everything. Not just the Phoenix Initiative, but the experiments, the locations, the names, the children who hadn't survived, the doctors who had covered it up, and the people funding it all. People who operated from behind boardrooms and billion-dollar foundations. The kind of power that didn't wear uniforms or hold guns because their weapons were silence and shadow. Keanu's shoulder still ached, where the bullet had grazed him, but he barely noticed it now. He'd been awake all night, piecing together the final timeline. Whoever had been behind the initiative, they weren't just running a lab. They were preparing for something. Phoenix wasn't a program. It was a blueprint, and Layla was the prototype. He turned toward her, watching her chest rise and fall with each slow breath. She didn't know yet. Not all of it. Not the part he had found in the files while she slept. Not the name of the woman, listed as lead genetic architect, a name that matched one from an old news article, buried in a science blog, Dr. Elena Rourke, CEO of Lumicore Global. Not just a scientist, not just a researcher. She was now one of the most powerful biotech leaders in the country, smiling in magazines, appearing at charity events, all while overseeing the disappearance of children like Layla under the cover of Medicine and Advancement. And now she knew Keanu had the drive. The sound came just after sunrise, a low mechanical whir that didn't belong in a forest. Keanu's eyes narrowed. He stepped onto the porch, breath fogging in the cold air, and listened. A drone. Then another. High above the trees, sleek black surveillance drones circled in slow loops, barely visible against the dawn. Within minutes, a black SUV crept into view, crawling along the dirt road like a predator taking its time. Keanu stepped back inside. Layla, he said gently, we have to go. She woke instantly, no confusion in her face. Just clarity. She had grown used to running, used to surviving. They found us? She asked. They never stopped looking. Keanu grabbed the USB and slid it into a small protective case, tucking it into a pouch on his belt. He handed Layla a jacket, then slung a pack over his shoulder filled with only the bare essentials. Medical kit, burner radio, and a second copy of the drive on a hidden SD card. As they left through the back of the cabin, Devon's voice crackled. faintly over the radio he had left. Static first, then sharp words. Keanu, they're close. She's there too. Rourke herself. The message cut off in a burst of static. Rourke was here. Not just her men. Not just her mercenaries. But her. That meant one thing. She didn't trust anyone else to clean up the mess. And that meant she was afraid. They moved through the woods, sticks snapping underfoot, birds scattering from the branches above. Layla moved silently, focused. They weren't running anymore. They were heading toward something Keanu had planned since the night before. The old ranger tower at the edge of the reserve. The only place high enough to get a signal strong enough to transmit the decrypted files. The tower's satellite link had been offline for years, but Keanu had wired it back using a stolen junction box and pure instinct. The signal would only last a minute, but it would be enough if they got there. By the time they reached the base of the tower, the sound of distant engines grew louder. The woods trembled with motion. Drones, soldiers, something bigger closing in. Keanu climbed first, then reached down to help Layla. She moved quickly, hands strong on the metal rungs. At the top, the tower creaked under their weight, swaying slightly in the wind. Keanu set the laptop down, connected the drive, and powered up the signal repeater. "You sure it'll work?" Layla asked. "If it doesn't," Keanu said, "we're just two ghosts in the forest." The bar on the screen filled slowly. 10%, 30, 50. Below them, the woods rustled violently. Armed men in tactical gear emerged from the trees, fanning out, and behind them, stepping calmly in a long black coat and high boots, came Elena Rourke. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes cold, calculating. She didn't carry a weapon. She didn't need one. Her voice did the damage. "KeanuReeves," she called, raising her gaze toward the tower. "You've always played heroes, but this isn't a film. There's no audience here, just silence, just history." Keanu didn't answer. The bar hit 70%. Rourke stepped closer. "Layla is not what you think she is. She's a miracle, a chance to rebuild the future. You think you're saving her, but you're denying the world what it needs most." Keanu looked at Layla. She was breathing hard, her jaw clenched. He spoke softly so only she could hear. "You don't have to prove anything. You don't owe them your life. But I owe it to those who didn't make it," she whispered back. 85%. A shot rang out. A sniper round cracked the tower railing inches from Keanu's arm. They ducked. "You want the truth silenced that badly?" Keanu shouted. "I want the truth controlled," Rourke called back. 95. Layla stood now, no fear in her eyes. She stepped into the open edge of the tower, her palms raised, her voice strong and clear. "You wanted to rewrite evolution," she said, "but I'm not your legacy. I'm your reminder of every wrong you buried." The sky around them trembled. Drones malfunctioning, electronics sparking. Layla's power pulsed outward not in rage, but in resolve. Pure, focused, undeniable. Final beep. Upload complete. The files had been sent to global media, to independent scientists, to public health organizations. The truth was free. Down below, Rourke's face twisted, not in anger, but in something Keanu recognized: defeat. And in that moment, something else happened. A low, distant roar filled the sky. A news chopper, not military, not private, public. They had seen the signal. They had followed it. Rourke turned away, her voice sharp to her guards. "Pull back. Now." They retreated fast, blending into the trees like shadows fading. Keanu and Layla watched from above, breathless. It was over. Not the danger, not the story, but the silence. It was broken. Days later, in a quiet coffee shop under a different name, Layla sipped tea and stared at a newspaper. Her face was everywhere now. The Phoenix Initiative had been exposed. Arrests were being made. Survivors were stepping forward, but she didn't care about fame, just freedom. Keanu sat across from her, calm, quiet, watching her smile for the first time. "What now?" she asked. "Whatever you want," he replied. "You're free." She nodded. "And what about you?" He smiled faintly. "I'll go back to filming, pretending to be the hero." "You don't need to pretend anymore," she said. "You already are." He looked away, humbled. Outside the window, the world went on. People walking, laughing, living, unaware of the storm that had just passed. And that, Keanu thought, was the greatest reward. Not the credit, but the silence of peace after so much noise.